Welcome to the Big Séance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the Séance. Hi. Welcome back. Today on the show we have medium and metaphysician Lee Allen Howard, who is going to talk to us about the exciting topic of channeling. And before I kick that interview off, I just wanted to remind you that at any time during this podcast, please don't hesitate to push pause and call the feedback line. If you're using one of the podcast apps, you can probably find the number in the description and just click it. How easy is that? But it's 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. Also, don't forget about the record audio feedback link at the top of the page at BigSeance.com. Have a question? Just want to give me a shout out? I love hearing from you. All right, well, I'll be back a little later after the interview, so let's get to it. So here we are with Lee Allen Howard, who is a medium and metaphysician. I'm super excited, not only because, as you know, I love reading about and talking with mediums, but Lee is our first male medium on the podcast. So boy power.
Yay!
Woo! But also because his blog, buildingthebridge.com, was one of the blogs that I started following at the time I started my own blog, BigSeance.com. So I've never met Lee physically, but I've followed him through some pretty cool stuff. And I also should probably randomly add that you're going to probably hear some rumbles and thunder in the background, and that's because we had a giant storm just roll through. Or maybe Lee brought it with him. Possibly. I'm not sure. Well, Lee Allen Howard is a graduate of the Morris Pratt Institute. And along with all the blogging, he is a novelist as well. Just recently, he was ordained with Fellowships of the Spirit, School of Spiritual Healing and Prophecy in Lilydale, New York, which I am so very interested in learning about, and so I may sneak some questions about that toward the end. But really, Mr. Howard is here with us to talk about something else I've always been very interested in, and that is channeling. So, Lee, your bio gave us a little sneak peek. But really, tell us about yourself. What's your background and what got you to where you are now?
Well, I have a very, I don't know if it's different or not, but my background was that my father was an evangelical pastor, and he was with the Evangelical United Brethren Church, and in 1968, they merged with the Methodist Church, and that's when they became the United Methodist denomination. So, but we came from a very conservative Christian evangelical background where, a lot of this stuff about, communication with spirits and mediumship and anything paranormal was really not something that we wanted to get into. And I'll save all the things that it was called, but it wasn't smiled upon.
Yes.
So that was my background. So, going to church. I also got hauled off to the funeral home a lot. And so every parishioner that died, I was there at the funeral home with my parents and, was usually playing under, one of those big Queen Anne chairs that they have next to the stand with the tissues on it or some big, huge vase of, chrysanthemums. And I was playing under the chairs, and I don't know. I don't think that I ever saw anybody's spirit there, but I think that that's how I became one of the ways that I became sensitive to spirits. So, that was my childhood. After I graduated college, I became a Christian. I had one of those born again experiences, and I became a Christian. And then, to the chagrin of my father, the evangelical, I became Pentecostal and experienced what they call the baptism in the Holy Spirit. And I began to speak in tongues. And of course, evangelicals don't believe that either, and they think that it comes from the same source that mediumship does. But I sure enjoyed it. So I came from a Christian background, and I was married for quite a while, and then I decided to come out. Our relationship had run its course, and my wife and I divorced amicably. I was in ministry for 3 years. I was a pastor of a house church. But when I decided to come out, then, we quit the ministry. We got divorced. We're still friends. And then I was kind of lost for a few years. But in 2007, I had a profound psychic experience that just seemed to bring like a spiritual presence into the room, and I just felt all kinds of energy. And for several months, I was just experiencing daily, these visitations, and I didn't know what they were. But from that time, I started to devour things, all things having to do with the New Age and spiritualism. And I guess I started with Edgar Cayce, who fascinated me. And so I just started studying that and about metaphysics, and that's kind of how I got my start in my new direction in 2007.
So it sounds to me like probably a lot of your either religious experiences or a lot of that background, does it kind of all combine together to create kind of your belief system? And I don't know what I'm trying to say. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. I think that I've decided that I'm going to keep the best and leave the rest.
Yeah.
Now, there are some things that I appreciate about my background, and there are some things that I can certainly do without. And so I'm keeping the good stuff. I have a master's degree in biblical studies, and I still read my Bible, and Spirit speaks to me through the inspiration of the Bible, and I like that, and I want to keep that. But some of the doctrine, that the church has used to bash people or exclude people or anything like that, that's something that I can leave behind, because it's not something that's embracing it, and it's not anything like I would experience Christ to be like. And so I also like my Pentecostal heritage. When I was filled with the Holy Spirit, I began to speak in tongues, and I've written blogs about this, and I'm going to keep those abilities, and I want to be able to minister to people prophetically with those abilities. So I'm keeping those. And I'm adding on things like mediumship and spiritual healing and channeling and all those types of things. I'm very open to all of it. And like I said, I want to keep the best and leave the rest.
Absolutely. So before we get too heavy into the channeling, I'm not sure I even know this. How did your blog, Building the Bridge, get started?
That was back in, 2010, I think. I think I've had it for about 4 years. And somehow I got inspired to post something. And my first posts, they were kind of scattered, and they weren't particularly on any one topic. And I didn't post very often. But once I started studying spiritualism and mediumship, then I started to get inspired to write about, building the bridge. And that's the bridge of communication between, your personal energy field and that of higher consciousness. And so I would write about those topics and basically anything that came to mind.
So, and I assume a lot of that was had begun your channeling at that point, right?
Well, I call it channeling now, but when I started, that really wasn't in my worldview. And I would have thought that was of the devil, or that was something that was not kosher for me to do. But in 1989, I had this burning desire to hear the voice of God, because, once you're filled with the Holy Spirit, then you get prophetic gifts. And one of them is, prophecy. Another one is speaking in tongues. And another is interpreting the message that was given in tongues. And, along with healing and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to be able to hear the voice of God, or the voice of the Holy Spirit speaking to me, because Jesus said, "My sheep hear my voice," and I wanted to hear that voice. So I decided that I was going to hear, and I read books about it, and I sat down one day in August of 1989, and I asked God to speak to me. And then I sat down with a pad of paper, and I just started to write what I felt I heard. And I wasn't really sure whether I was making it up or, whose voice it was. I mean, definitely I wanted it to be God's voice. So I just kept writing, and every day I would sit and I would do my, devotional time. I'd read a chapter of the Bible, and I would sit there and then I would listen and see what this voice would have to say. And I would hear this voice like on the inside of me, in the center of my being. And I would sit and then I would write the words that I heard. And then I would take and I would type them and put them in my computer. And for many years, I didn't think that I really wasn't sure what it was. Mm-hmm. I didn't tell anybody about it because you know what they say about people who hear voices. But I just kept a track record. So that's kind of how I got started. And I amassed at that time, I amassed over 1,000 pages of that kind of writing. But then it was in 2007, and then especially in 2010, where I decided that I wanted to meet a new guide, that I really began channeling in earnest. And I actually, instead of writing out my messages in longhand, I retrained myself to sit at the computer because I was kind of tired of writing it out longhand and then having to transcribe it. So then I sat at the computer, and then I decided, well, I'm going to record these with an audio recorder. So I had to retrain myself to then speak what I heard. And that's how I got started. And I just, kept track of all those things. And from May 29th, 2010 until today, I've recorded about 208 channeling sessions.
Wow.
Yeah.
So after all of that and what you know now, what is channeling?
Well, channeling, I believe, is it's a form of mediumship in which the medium or the channeler connects with spirit at a higher realm than the Summerland. And the Summerland is the place where your loved ones dwell. Mm-hmm. So there's mediumship that you talk to departed loved ones, but channeling, you are communicating with spirit at a higher level or at a higher realm. So higher dimensions are the realms where ascended guides and teachers dwell, and these are beings that vibrate at a higher rate. And so they are, Catholics may consider that, their saints are on this level. We would consider that perhaps, Buddha or Jesus or, ascended masters like that are at this level. Or you could say that you can channel angels and you can communicate with them, but they're at a higher level than the Summerland.
So you are probably less interested in, or maybe you are, I guess I shouldn't suggest it, less interested in communicating with more of your average everyday spirit, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, that's where I started, and that's definitely probably my primary interest.
Oh, okay.
After I had a nephew that died in 2010. And that's when I really got interested in mediumship, because I wanted to learn, I wanted to know what happened to you after you died. Mm-hmm. I always had a general belief, that we would go to heaven or that there was an afterlife. But when somebody close to you like that dies, especially somebody so young, it just, you wonder, well, what really has happened to them? Where are they? Can we communicate with them? And that's when I started studying with Morris Pratt. And from there, it just kind of opened up and blossomed. And that's, kind of when my channeling expanded also.
And I think that question is probably something that everyone listening to this podcast has asked themselves or continues to ask themselves, as a paranormal person and someone who's completely into this stuff. It's in my mind all the time. Mm-hmm. I don't know that we ever really get the answer, or at least, those of us that aren't channeling every day, we probably don't have the answer. So I've taken a basic course on channeling, and I've read quite a bit about it. It has been a long time since I've focused myself to get into a routine of, meditation or attempting something like that. But like a lot of things, I'm clearly not a natural and haven't been too successful with it. How did your ability to channel develop over the years? And I think you've kind of answered this already. When did you know that it really was a thing, that an ability that you had that, a lot of other people don't have?
my channeling really took off in 2010 when I got a significant message from my guide at the time having to do with the matrix. And what is the matrix is an entry that's on my blog. And so I started to pay attention to those things. And it wasn't until I committed to having and holding a regular channeling session every week that my ability actually began to grow, and I began to set my intention to connect at a higher level. And then I would meditate. I would meditate every day, and then at the end of my meditation, I would do my channeling. And then last year, I switched from doing it weekly to doing it 3 times a week, and then it really took off. I was having a lot more continuity with the messages that were coming through, and I started blogging about them, and I began to see patterns in the information that they were giving me, and I was writing blogs about it, and I would search my channel database for particular phrases that they would say, and saw that they would crop up years apart. So, and I can talk about that a little more too.
Speaking of that, my next question is that clearly you have to have some amazing, organization system. I mean, I can think to how I, store EVP and things like that, and kind of the system I have to store that. But how do you store channeled messages so that you can easily go back and reference things so easily like you do in your blog?
Sure. First of all, it helps if you have a little OCD like I do, and I insist that the word anal retentive does have a hyphen, so very, very meticulous about how I record the information. Mm-hmm. I used to write them longhand, and then I would type them into computer. And in the early days, I just put them in Microsoft Word files. And when I got perhaps a year or a few months in one file, then I would start another file. And a couple of years ago, I decided to put them in a database program. So I have an XML database where I put in all of the topics. I record all of my dreams. If I get a significant message from another medium or another psychic, I transcribe that and I put that in there. Mm-hmm. So I keep track of everything, and it's dated. I put in the date and the time of the session, and I number my channeling sessions. So then I can see in my database. It's just like a Windows Explorer, or if you have a Mac, you would open up a window that shows all your files, and they're all there, and they're mm-hmm. listed by date order. And of course, there's a search engine with it, and I can search for anything that I want to, and I can find, whenever I've spoken a particular word or a particular phrase, wherever it occurs, anywhere from 1989 to yesterday.
That is so cool. That took a lot to set up, I bet, though. I mean, I don't know that I could just set that up.
Yes, it did. And like I said, it had several iterations, but I got to the point where I wanted it to be easy, and I used the same program that I use for technical writing on my job. So I already knew the software, and I knew its capabilities, and it's able to publish things then. Mm-hmm. So it's really a heavy-duty tool, but I'm making good use of it.
So we hear about all the, the clairs, like clairvoyant and clairaudient. Do you classify yourself that way, or do you consider yourself one or both or any of the others?
There are 3 primary modes of communication or sensitivity in any individual. So I don't feel that I have any specific special gifts. I don't have any equipment that other people don't have. I've just chosen to develop it because I'm interested in it. And my primary mode is clairvoyance, meaning I see things, mm-hmm. and clairsentience, which means that I feel things. So when I'm doing readings for people, those are the 2 modes that are most used when I receive information from, psychic information or information from the spirit realm. And I haven't really figured out how channeling jibes with clairaudience, which is auditory. Mm-hmm. So that still remains a mystery to me, but I'm primarily clairvoyant and kinesthetic.
Mm-hmm. So some how-tos for me. Since I've struggled so much with this, but I'm so interested in it. You talked a little bit about kind of your routines, or I guess rituals that you have set when you do channel. But take us through it. I guess you do have just kind of a set routine. You don't wait until you like feel that there's a message there, or does that happen sometimes?
Sometimes I will be about my business during the day, and I like to describe it as something showing up in my inbox. That I have a feeling, or I just know that my guides are trying to tell me something, or they want to communicate, and I may not sit down right at that moment, but I may be busy doing something. I could be in the car, but they'll, like the message on your phone, when you get a text message, it'll ding. Where I get a feeling like that. So then I can then tune in. But usually I just decide when I want to channel. And like I said, I meditate every day now for 20 minutes in the morning, and 3 or 4 days a week, I just do my channeling routine at the end of my meditation. And it's nothing special. I don't think that it's something that everyone has to do this way, but I like to meditate so that I'm in a calm state. And meditation helps you open up your aura and your connection with higher realms. And so when I do that, then I just decide that I'm going to go higher. And I usually see like a big stream of light coming down, and then it fills my soul star, which is the chakra that floats above your head, the crown of your head. And that's white. And then it comes down into my crown chakra, which is violet. And then it goes to my third eye, which is indigo. And it goes down to my throat, blue. The heart is green, and then the solar plexus is yellow, and the sacral chakra is orange, and then the root is red, and then it goes down into the earth. And then that energy then comes back up through my body, and I just visualize it going up into the highest realms. And then I greet my guides, and I say, what would you have to say to me today? And they usually have a message then that comes right out, and I begin to speak it and record it.
Do you ever send in like a special request, like for a specific entity, or like the spirit guide that you mentioned earlier when you met your new spirit guide?
My new spirit guide is somebody that I would consider, I used to think he was my master teacher, but now I'm not so sure. He's more of a kind of a director, that he is the manager on the other side who connects me with the other guides or the spirit beings that I need to talk to. And he's told me that I don't really need to be concerned about, connecting with any individual. If I just tune into his frequency, then he'll bring in the others as they're needed.
Awesome.
So he's kind of like a contractor. He's the main person I deal with, except he's a lot more reliable than like the people that I'm, are doing the electric in my house and stuff like that. So... But, I just connect to him. I know what his frequency is, what his wavelength is, and then he connects me to whoever I need to talk to.
Are there times that you've channeled and it's silent and nothing comes through? And do you ever fall asleep waiting? Because I have experience with that one.
I've never fallen asleep, but I have often. Well, not often, but occasionally. I'll ask a question and then I'll seem to get no answer. And I think most of the time it's because I'm physically tired or I'm mentally tired. Another is it's not that they're refusing to talk to me. It's that I'm asking something that they can't really explain in a way that I would understand. That's in itself is kind of hard to explain, but you have to know what you're asking to be able to understand an answer. And sometimes they're not able to communicate that into my understanding. So it comes forth as them, not answering, but it's not
try
because
again later.
Yeah, try again later. That's what the Magic 8 Ball says.
So what's the most significant message that you've received, do you think?
I would have to say, well, I'm a little partial to what's happened recently.
Yeah.
And in April, I started to get intimations and dreams that I was going to be moving. And so I decided to look up in my database of channeled information, which is now about 1,300 pages. And there was a phrase that they spoke to me called pick up and move. And somehow I just knew that I had heard that before. So I searched my database for it, and I discovered that, when was it? It was September 10th, 1993, my guide said, "When it is time to go, I will let you know. When it is time for you to pick up and move, I will let you know." So 1993, they started using this phrase, pick up and move. And so I kept going through my...
And you probably didn't remember that until you looked back at it?
Absolutely not. Like I write these things down, and they're kind of like dreams. Unless I review the words, I put them in my database, and I forget about them. You know, it's like... if I didn't eat the same thing for breakfast every morning, I wouldn't be able to remember what I ate.
Yeah.
You know, if I didn't have a driveway, I wouldn't know where my car was. Okay. So something that I spoke, 21 years ago, no.
Right.
I don't remember that. And it's usually just a sentence or two, or maybe a paragraph that's stuck in a page of them talking about other things. So I just write it down and I put it in my database, and then I searched, and later on, I found there was another instance of it in 1993, and it cropped up in 2010. It cropped up in 2014. So I pulled out all those messages about pick up and move, and I put them all together. And together, then, when I read them, the portions of those messages, I read them in order. They really kind of told a story that I was going to be picking up and moving to a new place where I would kind of start a new life, and I would start my ministry of spirit work to the world. And so that was pretty significant. So I started house hunting, and I think you've been keeping abreast of some of this.
And I had to tell the listeners that I was really hoping that Lee would go through this whole story. You have to, check the blog out and kind of follow, I think you call it the Saga on your blog. It's just, and as you're talking about going back all the way to, your first messages of when they're going to tell you when to move, it just gives me chills. So listeners, you have to go and you have to check that out. But do please continue, Lee. I'm sorry.
There's Time to Pick Up and Move. That's one of my blog entries, and then there's the Saga of Selling My House, and that's a series. It's a series of 3 messages that kind of details all the things that my guide said to me ahead of time about buying a new house, selling my house in Pittsburgh, and then moving. And if they hadn't started telling me over 20 years ago that this was going to happen, I probably wouldn't have done it, because moving is not a fun thing to do. When you have been living in a house for years and years, and you have as many books as I do, you just don't want to pick up and move. But I knew that they were telling me that I was going to enter, kind of a new chapter of my life. And actually, things have kind of petered out for me there in Pittsburgh, and I was ready to move. So, but by listening to their messages and then putting them all together, I had the confidence that they were going to prepare the way for me, and they certainly did. I started to look for houses, and I had a dream that my grandmother appeared to me, and she appeared on this sun porch, and she said, "How do you like my new sun porch patio?" And so I went to house hunting, and I came to Jamestown, New York, and this house that I saw a number that I didn't like, but I came into this house, and there was a sun porch on there. And as soon as I came in, and it was just like the one where my grandmother appeared to me in my dream, I knew that was the house for me. So I made an offer on it. It was accepted. And it just went on from there. It was like dominoes falling, one after another. All the things, all the synchronicities that lined up for me to be able to buy this house and then sell my house in Pittsburgh.
And it is a beautiful home. Oh my gosh. So I can't imagine how much confidence you'd have to have in a message to just pick up like that. I don't know that I could get myself to be that confident.
Well, I was shaking my shoes all the way, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It didn't stop me from, having a few anxiety attacks along the way. Putting my house up for sale, I didn't want to own 2 houses at the same time. I do not want to be a land baron, anything like that. I just want one house, and I want to have my mortgage paid off. That's my dream in life. But I did these things in faith, and they would tell me things that were going to happen, a few weeks or a month, 6 weeks beforehand, and they would tell me a few times, and then they would happen just as they said they would. They said that they had a buyer lined up for my Pittsburgh house. I put it on the market myself. Only one couple came to see that house. while it was on the market. And they're the only ones that made an offer. They were enthused about the house. They were excited about the house, just as Spirit said they would be. And they made their offer, and I just closed on the house just a couple weeks ago. So, although I was nervous about it, everything that Spirit told me about the sale, about the moving, about the purchase of the new house, it all came to pass. So I figure if they've got a good track record there, then they're going to continue. And I don't know exactly what's next, but I'm confident that they're going to have something good for me.
But it seems to be kind of right on track right now. You got a good feeling about it?
Oh, yes.
Awesome.
Making friends here. I'm closer to Lilydale. I'm only about 25 minutes away, so I'm able to go to church there, go to workshops there, and, volunteer there. So it's very exciting.
And that's another one of my fascinations. I don't think Lee is quite ready for me to bug him about Lilydale, but one of these days we'll call him back and really bug him about that, because I could just hear people talk about Lilydale all day long. So, do you have plans to channel publicly?
Yes. Well, my guides have been talking and blathering at me for decades now, and in the last year or so, they've been telling me that I'm to channel for others. And of course, my first reaction is anxiety. I'm a big worrywart, and I don't really want to do that, but they keep, telling me that that's what I'm going to do, and that's what I've recently been writing about on my blog. Mm-hmm. So for a school project, I'm in my second year at Fellowships of the Spirit in Lilydale. My project is to do private and public channeling. So I will be starting sessions with individuals and groups.
Very cool. And so what does someone do if they want to go about having some kind of session with you or channeling session with you?
Well, they can contact me at my blog. My email is, if you're interested in channeling, you can contact me at channeling@buildingthebridge.com. And Building the Bridge is building-the-bridge.com.
And we'll put that in the show notes too, so that'll be easily clickable.
Okay.
So, as we've mentioned, you're also a writer, and I've read one of your other books, which I very much enjoyed. But you have a book called Death Perception, where the main character is actually a psychic medium. And Lee actually wrote a guest blog post for me about this book about a year ago. So maybe that link is something I should put in the show notes. But can you share anything about that book in case listeners are interested in that?
Sure. I also have a master's in genre fiction writing. And my thesis, that was my thesis novel. And at the time I started writing that was back in 2003, 2004. I didn't believe in any of this stuff. I didn't believe in anything New Age. I didn't believe in mediumship. I didn't believe in channeling. None of that. I was still, in my former religious beliefs. But I had a love for fantastic fiction, especially dark fiction and crime fiction. So I wrote this story about a young man called Kennet Singleton who runs the crematory at the local funeral home. And he discovers, by toasting marshmallows over the ashes of the departed in the crematory oven, that he can discern the cause of death. So he discerns the cause of death of these people, which is no big deal, he thinks, because they're already dead. However, when what he discerns differs from what's written on the death certificate, then he finds himself in the midst of murderers. And of course, then he becomes kind of a psychic, mediumistic detective.
So just how cool is it? I'm going to force you to go here a little bit. How cool is it to be around so much cool history and to experience Fellowships of the Spirit and Lilydale? Because I am super jealous. Give us a little taste of Lilydale.
Well, I'll have to tell you, it is really cool. Mm-hmm. So Lilydale has been around since late in the 1800s, and they were one of a few spiritualist camps that were established in America. And they've been giving messages. They have a place there at Lilydale called the Stump. So there's kind of this cathedral that's out in a wooded grove, and they have benches set up, and there's a stump out there, and people used to stand on this stump, and they would give messages from spirit, from loved ones, to people in the congregation there. And they've been doing that twice a day all summer long since 1898. And in one of my classes, I was able to go out there and I gave messages there. So I was able to stand there where people like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who was a spiritualist, he wrote the Sherlock Holmes mystery series. And he and his wife had a protege. Her name was Edith Sandy Wendling. And she became a medium, and she began to train people. And one of her proteges was a woman named Elaine Thomas. And she is the director of Fellowships of the Spirit. So she's my mentor and just a wonderful medium and really a terrific person and has so much to teach. And it's very exciting to learn there and be there with my classmates. But I've kind of had a direct succession through Elaine Thomas to Edith Wendling to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
That's cool.
Yeah, and there were other people like Susan B. Anthony was at Lilydale, and it's just a great place. People go there and they just remark about, how different the energy is. And you see, there are mediums just about in every home, and you can go in and get readings. There's workshops there all day, every day, all week long through the summer months. And there's places that you can stay, and it's a quaint place, and you can get some history. There's a museum there that's got a lot of cool artifacts. You would love it, Patrick.
Oh, I know I would. And the houses are so cute.
They are. They are very quaint Victorian homes, and a lot of them are very well kept, and the gardens are beautiful, and it's just a really, really nice place to go and experience. It's kind of like a portal under heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Lee, right after I met Lee online and started reading his blog, you had taken several trips to Lilydale even before your recent journey, right?
Yes.
And I remember him telling me about it. And I, if I remember correctly, I think you were the first person to actually even bring it into my brain. Like, I don't think before I'd read information about the Fox sisters and the rise of spiritualism, I don't think I even knew Lilydale was a thing. And you were telling me this, and I was like, oh my gosh. And so ever since then, I've kind of been, really fascinated by it. So I'm glad you had the opportunity to really kind of start this journey out there.
So it's I hadn't heard of it until about 4 or 5 years ago, and then once I went there, I really fell in. So there's no going back. I'm here for the duration.
Very cool, and I can't wait to follow it all on your blog. Hopefully, you'll continue to take us with you, right?
I shall. I will let you know of when I begin my public channeling, which will be very soon, and I'll open that up to anybody who's interested in it, and I'll post my progress with school and everything else that's going on.
Well, Lee, go ahead now. If there's any links or anything, Lee Allen Howard that we haven't talked about that you want to promote, go ahead and do that. And then also, if there's any, links maybe to your blog that talks about channeling that you want me to include in the show notes, you can just send that to me and I will, I'll include those things in the show notes if people have questions.
Okay. Well, like I said, my blog is buildingthebridge.com. It's http://building-the-bridge.com. And you can also find me on Facebook if you search for Lee Allen Howard, Medium and Metaphysician. And if you're into Twitter, if you like those little 140-character messages, then you can follow me at Rev Lee Howard on Twitter.
Well, I am so glad we had the opportunity to chat and talk live for the first time. Very cool.
Yes, and I appreciate everything that you do on Big Séance, and you post some really interesting stuff there, and I like your perspective on it.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. You rock.
Thanks, Patrick. So do you.
You're listening to the Big Séance podcast with Patrick Keller. Look for us on iTunes and be sure to check out BigSeance.com for more discussion.
Lee is so fun to talk to, and he has fascinating stuff to read at buildingthebridge.com, so you really should check it out. Well, it's getting toward the middle of September, and as you know, I'm getting super excited for the fall season and Halloween. To celebrate, I'm working on getting some great content for everyone in the next several weeks. I am so incredibly pumped and excited about a couple of them for sure, but I can't say much. But listen, I haven't given you any homework assignments, or I haven't really bugged you in a while, so I'm wondering if you can help me really make a splash for this fall season, which is a big time for podcasts in the paranormal category. Would you consider doing two things for me? Number one, make sure you find me on Twitter, and make sure you've liked the Big Séance Facebook page. My Twitter handle is @BigSeance. You can also find those links at bigseance.com. Number two, it would be awesome if you could share your favorite podcast episode via social media like Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Google+, or maybe just send an episode to a fellow nerd friend who might like the topic. I would be so grateful. And now, the torture is over. I look forward to next week, and I'll be excited to announce and award the winner of the remote viewing contest from the Janice Carlson episode. That'll be next time, right here on the Big Séance podcast. For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com, now the home of both the blog and the podcast. Just click on the Big Séance podcast logo or find it in the menu. You can also find and subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher. Do you have any comments or feedback? Please contact me at patrick@bigseance.com. You can call my feedback line at 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. You can also record audio feedback right from the site using the SpeakPipe link included in the show notes. I could decide to include your voice in a future show. Thank you so much for listening and reading. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.